So this has been delayed. Was this expected?
Well, of course, initially, no, it wasn't. I think, as of yesterday or the day before, it really became a sort of realistic prospect that it would be delayed. What's quite incredible about this is the demonstration that the Home Office has not done its planning and preparation correctly or thoroughly. The problem here is one of the fire inspections and the signing off the accommodation as suitably fireproof. And, to be fair, in a sense, the probability of a fire on there, the fire control on board the Bibby Stockholm is adequate. What the problem is evacuation should there be a fire. And that's one of the problems with using vessels of this sort. But it's quite incredible that it wasn't signed off in the planning and preparation stage of this. But that rather reflects the poor planning across the board when it comes to dealing with the large number of asylum seekers that we've got, particularly those coming across the Channel. There should be an end-to-end approach, a strategic approach that deals with the upstream disruption of organised crime at every conceivable and possible point, from the point of origin of these asylum seekers on the organised crime networks, all the way through to and within the United Kingdom. There also needs to be more resources and more planning put into the processing of the whole thing. And part of that should be not only resourcing the system correctly, because it is far from well-resourced. As I've said before, David Cameron and Theresa May cut policing by 21,000. OK, the Conservative Party is mitigating that somewhat by bringing another 20,000 police officers. But what people didn't see was that they did a similar thing with our whole immigration system. They've cut corners, they've reduced training, they've reduced the pay grades and so on. There's a massive problem in terms of resourcing. So that needs to be dealt with in the processing. And then you've got the accommodation, and accommodation should be part of the processing. So when somebody comes across the border, for example, across the Channel, then they should be put in a processing centre, rather similar to airside. If you travel into the UK, you land in Gatwick, you've arrived in the United Kingdom, but for immigration purposes, you are not deemed to have entered the United Kingdom until you've transited immigration controls. We should have similar legal and physical facilities on our maritime border, do a screening, and those people, for example, Albanians, who we now have a fairly thorough agreement with for returns, should be returned directly from there, rather than be brought into more permanent accommodation. That accommodation should be dealt with in a more strategic, long-term manner, not ad hoc hotels, and pardon the pun in relation to the Bibby, but firefighting solutions with RAF bases and so on, because there's also a similar problem to this at RAF Scampton, where it hasn't been properly signed off yet by the local sort of planning authorities. So that's delayed somewhat too. This is a comedy of errors and failure of strategic planning from start to finish. It's shocking.
As you say, it is shocking because even the sticking plaster solutions don't work here. So why can't the Home Office get to grips with this?
Well, I think it really boils down to this: they don't have the knowledge or the expertise. And I'm not trying to be funny here, but if you bring somebody in from Border Force to a planning unit within the Home Office, what does Border Force know about combating transnational organised crime as far back as the Middle East or the Sahel and Maghreb of Africa? What do such people, civil servants, for example, know of that subject? What do they know of logistical planning of this scale? They don't. What is required, as I have done for other countries, I have brought in multiple agencies from across the government into national working groups, answering directly to the cabinet, sometimes even the president, to enable coordination and the correct authority that's needed to move the machinery. You bring them all in, you create a strategic planning group with working groups in each government department to follow this through. That's simply not happening in the British government. And just to branch this out slightly, in the whole Brexit thing, in the run-up to us leaving the European Union, in fact, before the referendum, you had every country that we had great dealings with, particularly those in the European Union, who had set up specific cross-governmental departments, cross-governmental, not separate departments, in order to assess and prepare for the impact on them of us leaving the European Union. I know that because I was chief planner for common security and defence policy in the EU at the time. And in the UK, we did not. It was incoherent. And it really blew the minds of all of our international partners. The incompetence within Whitehall is startling. And we're seeing it in this. We're seeing it in healthcare. We're seeing it in education. We're seeing it in defence. We're seeing it in transport. This is a very open, public demonstration of that failure. And somehow we've got to bring leadership and strategic planning and operational planning into Whitehall. But the civil service are pretty close to that idea.